When the system gave up, their families didn't. This is the story of relentless love, strength, and the refusal to accept defeat. The final surveillance footage shows Christie Wilson, a 27-year-old woman with an analytical mind and a talent for counting cards at blackjack tables. She frequented the Thunder Valley Casino near Sacramento, where her mathematical skills had earned her substantial winnings. But on this particular evening, something was different. The cameras captured her being watched, followed by a stranger whose presence would alter everything that followed. Christie appeared disoriented at the gaming table, her behavior completely uncharacteristic for someone known for her sharp focus and control. She had consumed only one drink that night, offered to her by the man who had positioned himself beside her. What she didn't realize was that her beverage had been tampered with. The man leaned uncomfortably close, ignoring her obvious discomfort. Later, parking lot surveillance would capture him grabbing her as she attempted to push him away. This stranger had a history of violence against women, including kidnapping and murder. That night, Christie Wilson vanished without a trace. Surveillance cameras documented her departure from the casino with the older man, leaving her family desperate for answers. Her mother Debbie would later reflect on their urgent need to know whether Christie was alive or dead, expressing their singular goal of bringing her home. However, Debbie Wilson proved to be a formidable advocate for her missing daughter. Despite her petite stature, she described herself as a barracuda ready for battle, determined to find the truth no matter the cost. On October 4, 2005, Christie had spoken with her mother by telephone. The conversation covered typical subjects, including the approaching Halloween holiday. Christie had recently photographed her cat wearing a Halloween costume, sharing the amusing image with her family. More importantly, she had positive news to share regarding her employment situation. Following significant layoffs at her technology company, Christie had been unemployed for several weeks. However, she had recently been selected for a promising job interview scheduled for 2 days later. Her family recalled her excitement about this fresh start and new opportunity for career advancement. Christie was temporarily staying at her ex-boyfriend's apartment while preparing for her move to San Francisco, where her new position would be located. Though excited about relocating, there was one place she would genuinely miss. The Thunder Valley Casino on Sacramento's outskirts had become her personal playground, where she had earned impressive sums playing blackjack. Christie possessed a naturally analytical mind that served her well at the gaming tables. She had mastered card-counting techniques and consistently recognized when statistical odds favored her play. Her mathematical approach to blackjack regularly generated winnings exceeding $5,000 per evening at Thunder Valley. That evening, Christie decided to visit the casino one final time before departing for San Francisco. Around 10:30 p.m., she telephoned her ex-boyfriend to inform him of her imminent departure. However, Christie never returned to the apartment that night. The following day, her ex-boyfriend attempted to reach her 72 times, leaving increasingly concerned voicemail messages. At 10 p.m. on October 6th, Debbie and her husband received the phone call that would forever change their lives. Danny, Christie's ex-boyfriend, informed them that Christie had gone to Thunder Valley Casino and hadn't been seen since. He wanted to file a missing person report immediately. 48 hours had passed since Christie's disappearance. Police explained that because Christie was an adult, they required evidence proving she hadn't left voluntarily. The fact that Christie had been struggling with depression complicated their case significantly. Her mother recalled how Christie had been experiencing a difficult emotional period, feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Debbie had tried to encourage her daughter by pointing out her many accomplishments and positive qualities, including her beauty and vibrant personality. These maternal words seemed to resonate with Christie, who had already begun taking concrete steps to address her mental health concerns. Among her belongings, Debbie discovered self-help materials including tapes and CDs titled Attacking Anxiety and Depression. This demonstrated Christie's proactive approach to overcoming her struggles rather than simply accepting defeat. However, Debbie also found dozens of notebooks filled with Christie's handwriting, all focused on blackjack strategies and gaming techniques. This discovery forced the family to confront the possibility that Christie's passion for gambling had evolved into a serious addiction. When asked about Christie's casino frequency, Debbie admitted it was probably more often than she had previously imagined. This realization provided a crucial insight for Debbie. Christie's ex-boyfriend had stated she left the casino around 10:30 p.m., but what if the gambling excitement had convinced her to stay longer? What if something sinister had occurred while she remained inside the establishment? Thunder Valley's CCTV network consisted of over 700 individual cameras. Casino staff required time to identify, gather, and duplicate all relevant footage for the investigation. Meanwhile, detectives followed Debbie's intuition that if Christie had truly left voluntarily, she wouldn't have abandoned her beloved pet. Investigation confirmed that not only was her cat still present, but so were her luggage, medication, and other personal belongings. Now convinced something was seriously wrong, police returned to the casino and began reviewing surveillance footage systematically. Initially, everything appeared normal. Christie arrived shortly before 7 p.m., withdrew cash from the ATM, exchanged it for gaming chips, and sat at a blackjack table where she was winning as usual. Then investigators noticed something concerning. A short, stocky man with black hair stood near the slot machines, watching Christie intently. After some time, he positioned himself at another blackjack table. Christie switched tables several times before ultimately sitting beside this stranger. The man, who appeared approximately twice her age, acted friendly toward her, high-fiving and patting her back whenever she won. However, casino staff familiar with Christie's usual behavior reported that her demeanor changed dramatically after joining the man's table. She began losing more frequently, acting completely out of character, and becoming visibly disoriented. When her stepfather, San Jose Police Sergeant Patrick Boyd, reviewed the tapes personally, he confirmed this behavior was completely unlike her normal conduct. Patrick Boyd described observing Christie's physical rigidity and altered movement patterns on the surveillance footage. As both a police officer and stepfather, his instincts told him something was seriously wrong with the situation. The man's actions became increasingly intrusive throughout the evening. He wrapped his arms around Christie, touched her legs inappropriately, and leaned uncomfortably close despite her obvious discomfort. By 11 p.m., after 5 hours at the casino, Christie finally pushed him away and left the table. Footage showed her making a phone call to her ex-boyfriend, which was when she reportedly said she was about to leave. Instead of departing, Christie returned to the table and continued playing. As time passed, it became evident that Christie was intoxicated despite having consumed only one drink that evening, the beverage offered by the man. By 1 a.m., tensions escalated when Christie argued with a dealer. When security intervened, the man insisted he would personally escort her from the casino. However, as they walked toward the exit, his behavior became predatory. He grabbed Christie and pulled her close while she repeatedly pushed him away. The footage became increasingly troubling until both individuals disappeared from camera range into what investigators termed the black hole. Christie entered the surveillance blind spot and never emerged from that area again. The camera's rotation created a period where investigators couldn't observe what occurred during those crucial minutes. After Patrick shared these disturbing CCTV details with Debbie, the desperate mother felt overwhelmed. What had happened that night? Who was this man? Why had Christie behaved so strangely? Where was she now? But one question consumed her thoughts above all others, the one she voiced during her first public address since Christie's disappearance. The urgent need to know whether her daughter was alive or dead, and their desperate desire to bring her home. Debbie wasn't alone in feeling overwhelmed. Police couldn't investigate every lead simultaneously, so they prioritized finding Christie. A massive search operation began in fields surrounding the casino. Debbie and Christie's sister participated, but 3 days had elapsed since the disappearance, and the family feared they might already be too late. The family described wanting to hear details while simultaneously dreading them, imagining what Christie must have endured during her final hours. The search area's vast size created feelings of sheer panic about whether investigators could possibly locate her in such expansive terrain. Debbie had become a shadow of her former self since Christie's disappearance. However, one development quickly changed her emotional state. While the man stalked Christie from afar on casino cameras, he had used Thunder Valley slot machines linked to his membership card. Police identified the suspect as 53-year-old Mario Garcia. When this information was revealed to the Boyd family, Debbie's attitude shifted dramatically. She demanded that if Garcia was truly a man of character, he would reveal Christie's location immediately. She wanted her daughter returned without delay. Debbie and Patrick became beacons of hope during this crisis, enduring the unimaginable uncertainty of not knowing their daughter's whereabouts. Debbie transformed her pain into passionate determination. This revelation changed everything for Debbie. Someone had the answers she needed. Someone knew the truth about Christie's fate, and that someone was Mario Garcia. Surveillance cameras had captured Christie leaving the casino with this older man, and Debbie was prepared to fight for answers. However, police didn't necessarily share Debbie's certainty. Mario Garcia wasn't a drifter or known criminal. He was married, a father, a soccer coach, and owned a substantial ranch in the area. On paper, he seemed unlikely to be involved in a disappearance. His family supported him completely, insisting his involvement was impossible. Garcia's wife described their relationship in terms of destiny and connection, emphasizing their strong bond. His children portrayed him as a devoted father who ensured family togetherness through regular dinners and close relationships. They described themselves as a good, tight-knit family unit. Although Garcia didn't match typical criminal profiles, police conducted a background check anyway. They found nothing except a minor misdemeanor from the 1980s. However, when they contacted the victim, 52-year-old Wendy Ward, they discovered this represented only the beginning of a much darker pattern. Wendy Ward's testimony revealed Garcia's dangerous nature, particularly toward women who were alone and vulnerable. In her mid-20s, Wendy had dated Mario Garcia for several months. She described him as generally compassionate, but possessing an extremely violent side. After enduring months of uncontrollable outbursts, Wendy attempted to end their relationship, and Garcia sexually assaulted her in retaliation. During the assault, Garcia held her by the neck and threatened to smash her head if she resisted his demands. A few weeks later, when Wendy told him to stop harassing her by telephone, Garcia drove to her residence and kidnapped her in broad daylight. He commanded her to remove her clothes, and when she refused, he choked her while she clawed and scratched in self-defense. Garcia proceeded to assault Wendy again in the back of his van before driving to his apartment and dragging her inside. He retrieved a gun from his cabinet, loaded a cartridge, and held the weapon to her head while pulling the trigger. He then placed the gun in her mouth and pulled the trigger again. Although Garcia's gun wasn't loaded, Wendy experienced severe psychological trauma. The realization that she could have been killed overwhelmed the young woman completely. After breaking down in tears, Wendy was sexually assaulted a third time. Garcia then casually prepared a sandwich in the kitchen as if nothing had occurred. Wendy pressed charges, but the legal proceedings stalled for over 2 years. Initially, her legal team intended to charge Garcia with kidnapping, 3 counts of sexual assault, and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. However, Garcia was ultimately charged only with the latter offense, received a brief probation sentence, and later managed to reduce the charge to a misdemeanor, eliminating his felon status entirely. Wendy felt physically ill about the outcome, describing it as humiliating. Following her own experience with Garcia, she believed he could easily repeat such crimes against other women. She confirmed without hesitation that Garcia was absolutely dangerous. Garcia's past wasn't as clean as his public image suggested. However, what shocked detectives most was Wendy's additional information about Lynette Smith, Garcia's subsequent girlfriend. On Christmas Eve 1979, 1 year after Wendy's ordeal, Lynette told Garcia she was leaving him during a family dinner. Although pregnant with his child, she had endured constant beatings and abuse, ultimately deciding not to keep the baby. No records exist documenting Garcia's reaction to this news. Later that evening, Garcia, Lynette, and her mother were traveling home in Lynette's car when tragedy occurred. The specific details of what happened inside the vehicle remain unknown, including who was driving, but something went catastrophically wrong as they passed the Oakland estuary. Eyewitnesses reported seeing the vehicle pull over roadside, reverse to face the water, then suddenly accelerate through both traffic lanes and plunge directly into the estuary. Police arrived almost immediately and found Garcia still in the water, but there was no sign of Lynette or her mother. Strangely, Garcia didn't mention the other passengers until formal interrogation much later that night. Even more suspicious, immediately after revealing Lynette and her mother's presence, he requested his attorney and refused to provide any additional information to police. Lynette's body washed ashore 1 week later, and her mother was found dead inside the submerged car. No charges were ever filed against Garcia, who claimed he wasn't driving and somehow slept through the accident, conveniently allowing him to feign ignorance about the incident. The detectives were stunned. Their previously presumed innocent suspect was now revealed as not just a violent offender, but also an alleged murderer. When asked how she knew these details, Wendy explained that Lynette's brother, a childhood friend, had contacted her years earlier when she inquired about his sister's well-being. The revelation that Lynette had been killed in a car accident involving Mario Garcia left Wendy baffled. When she mentioned her own history with Garcia, the connection became clear. The brothers' disbelief was understandable, and Wendy's confirmation of her previous relationship and assault charges against Garcia completed the horrifying pattern. Following the detective's conversation with Wendy, Garcia was arrested. Unfortunately, without CCTV footage showing what actually happened to Christie, police still lacked concrete evidence against him. However, this didn't deter Debbie, who had spoken with Wendy and heard the horrific details of her story. The distraught mother knew she had to take action regardless of the legal challenges. The emotional impact of learning about Garcia's history devastated Debbie completely. The thought of him potentially escaping justice again terrified her, not just for Christie's case, but for every woman who might become his future victim. With Garcia in custody, detectives immediately noticed cuts and scratches covering his face and lower neck. His left eye was also swollen and bruised. When questioned about these injuries, the suspect quickly fabricated an explanation involving tree-clearing work on his property. The day after Christie's disappearance, Garcia had arrived at work late and left after only 1 hour, which was unusual behavior for a manager. His employees confirmed he already had the scratches when he arrived that morning. However, an emergency room doctor who had sat across from Garcia and Christie at the casino the previous evening couldn't recall seeing any injuries on his face. When asked specifically about observing any facial injuries, the doctor stated clearly that he hadn't seen any, and as a medical professional, he was reasonably skilled at making such observations. This testimony completely destroyed Garcia's alibi, as there was no logical explanation for him to be clearing trees in the middle of the night. However, one major challenge remained. If Debbie wanted justice, they would have to proceed to trial without Christie's body, and detectives had yet to discover any clues about her whereabouts. Instead, they focused on analyzing the parking lot surveillance footage gap, the so-called black hole. The parking lot cameras rotated on a 3-minute and 41-second cycle, briefly leaving certain areas unwatched. Garcia's car was barely visible on another camera feed, with only its taillights appearing in the frame. Whether by chance or design, he had parked in a surveillance blind spot. However, detectives found crucial evidence despite these limitations. Garcia was driving a Toyota Camry, and in the early 2000s, these models had an unusual feature where lights would flash in quick succession depending on how many doors were opened. For over 3 minutes, the secondary camera feed captured 4 flash sequences, indicating that every car door had been opened during this period. Just before the rotating camera swung back to cover the area, Garcia drove away. Instead of heading home as he later claimed, he traveled in the opposite direction. Garcia had been lying consistently throughout the investigation. Debbie, Patrick, and the state prosecutor were now ready to take Garcia to trial without a body, marking the first such case in North Sacramento legal history. Without Christie's remains or a murder weapon, everything would depend on circumstantial evidence. Convincing a jury beyond reasonable doubt would be extremely challenging, but they were determined to pursue justice regardless of the obstacles. The trial began on September 25, 2006, slightly over 1 year after Christie's disappearance. Wendy Ward met with Debbie and her family for the first time in court and remained by their side throughout the entire proceedings. The emotional reunion was powerful, with continuous embracing and mutual support. Debbie later described feeling as though Christie had wanted her to embrace Wendy in that moment. During the trial, the prosecution presented the CCTV footage to the jury, but this time it carried additional weight due to newly discovered evidence. Police had uncovered incriminating information on Garcia's computer showing that after Christie's disappearance, he had conducted extensive searches for information about date assault drugs. However, the most damning evidence came from Christie herself. Despite Garcia's attempts to clean his car with bleach, he failed to remove all traces of Christie's DNA. Microscopic strands of her hair and tiny droplets of her blood remained on the back seat, providing physical proof of her presence in his vehicle. The injuries Garcia sustained during Christie's final struggle provided compelling evidence of her resistance. In addition to attending kickboxing classes, Christie had received self-defense training from her stepfather Patrick. The police sergeant had taught her techniques like targeting an attacker's eyes or faking sexually transmitted diseases if someone attempted assault, skills she had previously used when an abusive ex-boyfriend physically attacked her. After police arrested that previous abusive ex-boyfriend, they documented his injuries which included scratches, bruises, and 4 deep claw marks on his chest. These were similar wounds to those Garcia sustained the night of Christie's disappearance, suggesting Christie had fought back using the same defensive techniques. The prosecution emphasized that Christie had fought relentlessly against her killer. If she was going to lose her life to violence, she ensured she left identifying marks on her attacker. The prosecution systematically dismantled Garcia's defense, exposing his lies, false alibis, suspicious injuries, DNA evidence, and surveillance footage inconsistencies. They demonstrated that a body wasn't necessary to prove what had occurred, as the overwhelming circumstantial evidence painted a clear picture of Garcia's guilt. The jury could feel what Christie must have experienced during her final moments. All of her defensive actions and the physical marks she left on Garcia made her presence felt throughout the courtroom proceedings. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, finding Mario Flavio Garcia guilty of murder. The courtroom erupted with celebration as justice was finally served after such a long struggle. However, for the Boyd family, this represented justice without closure. Garcia was imprisoned, but Christie remained missing, and her fate stayed locked away with the man who had taken her life. There was no happiness in this outcome, only a shallow victory that would always feel hollow because regardless of the legal outcome, Christie was gone forever. Christie had been a smart, intelligent young woman with tremendous potential, and Garcia had stolen that future from her. The question of where he had hidden her body remained unanswered, continuing to torment her family. Following the trial, Wendy, Debbie, Patrick, and Christie's sister attended Garcia's sentencing hearing. Due to extended procedures regarding Wendy's case, the judge more than doubled Garcia's sentence from 25 to 59 years, guaranteeing he would remain behind bars until his death. The convicted murderer was clearly unhappy about this outcome and remained unrepentant. Garcia stated that while he was supposed to ask for mercy and show remorse during the hearing, he would not do such things. Debbie responded by telling him directly that he had killed her daughter and that she believed he would kill again if given the opportunity. She thanked Christie for her bravery and fight, expressing her eternal love. From that point forward, the Boyd family had to campaign against Garcia's appeals every few years, reliving their trauma and loss repeatedly. However, nothing impacted them more than when Garcia began writing directly to Debbie in 2017. Although he didn't admit guilt or express remorse, his correspondence suggested that some kind of deal could be arranged to help her locate Christie. For 15 years, Debbie had gone to sleep every night wondering where Christie was, whether she was in an ocean, a ditch, or somewhere else entirely. She wanted Christie back so desperately that she considered engaging with Garcia's proposal to see how far it might lead. It remained unclear whether Garcia wanted a reduced sentence or complete freedom. However, Debbie faced a crucial decision. This might be her only opportunity to be reunited with her missing daughter. She harbored no illusions about Christie's condition after more than a decade, knowing her daughter was dead. Debbie simply wanted closure and the ability to turn the page on this chapter of grief. Yet closure came with a price, and the question became how much she was willing to pay for answers. Ultimately, Debbie realized she couldn't participate in such negotiations, recognizing that Garcia would not be allowed to use her daughter's body as a bargaining chip. At this point, hope seemed lost for Debbie and Patrick. However, following Garcia's failed plea attempt, detectives revisited the case and re-interviewed key individuals, especially Garcia's wife and now adult children. Their perspectives on Garcia had shifted significantly, and they no longer defended him. Garcia's son Chris shared something new that he had never fully understood before. A few days after Christie vanished, Chris had an important soccer game. Garcia, who coached the team, had never missed a game previously. However, when Chris went to get his father that day, he found him working frantically on his tractor far from their house, appearing disheveled and distressed. When Chris asked if Garcia was coming to the game, his father barely looked up and muttered that he wasn't coming. At the time, Chris didn't think much of this unusual behavior, but knowing everything that had transpired afterward, he wasn't certain about his father's activities that day. During their initial 2005 search, cadaver dogs had scoured Garcia's 5-acre property without finding anything. However, with the location Chris had identified in mind, detectives returned with ground-penetrating radar equipment. The technology quickly detected something buried deep beneath the soil, and excavation began immediately. 20 feet underground, they uncovered a bone. An archaeologist was brought in to determine whether it was human remains. After careful examination, The expert confirmed that the bone was indeed human, providing the breakthrough investigators had sought for 15 years. For the past decade and a half, Christie's case had been handled by the same pair of detectives, Nuno Tavares and Don Murchison. Both men fell to their knees when the archaeologist confirmed the human origin of the discovered bones. Finally, they had achieved a major breakthrough in the case. As excavation continued, the team discovered an entire skeleton, which forensic experts quickly identified as Christie's remains. The bones revealed that she had suffered a broken hand and nose, confirming that she had fought back against Garcia before he killed her. Later that evening, the two detectives visited Patrick and Debbie to announce that their daughter's body had finally been recovered. Debbie later recalled asking whether it was appropriate to feel happy or joyful about the discovery, looking around uncertainly about the proper emotional response to such news. The family didn't know whether to celebrate with champagne or simply process the mixed emotions of finally having answers. There were many embraces, periods of quiet reflection, and time spent letting the reality sink in completely. The following day, Debbie and Patrick announced the discovery to the world and properly thanked the detectives who had never stopped searching for their daughter over the past 15 years. They praised the exceptional level of perseverance in police work that victim families could hope for from law enforcement. The detectives had brought two people home. They had brought Christie home to her family, and they had brought Debbie's peace of mind home as well. Debbie was finally free from the uncertainty that had consumed her life. On the anniversary of Christie's death, Debbie had her remains cremated and finally laid her daughter to rest properly. They could now grieve in the way they should have been able to grieve 15 years earlier. There was peace in finally having closure, and Debbie felt blessed to have been Christie's mother for 27 years, carrying those memories with her forever. However, Christie's death had created wounds extending far beyond her immediate family. Her best friend Tiffany spoke at a memorial held in Christie's honor, promising never to forget her friend and to carry her memory always. Tiffany remembered words Christie had shared when Tiffany's sister died, almost as if Christie had unknowingly written her own eulogy, her voice reaching from beyond. In a recording that seemed prophetic, Christie's voice conveyed a message of eternal love and spiritual presence. She spoke about how although someone's physical body might not be present on earth, their spirit remains with loved ones forever. She encouraged others to remember that they would one day be reunited in heaven, providing comfort during difficult times. The case of Christie Wilson serves as a testament to a mother's unwavering determination, the persistence of dedicated law enforcement officers, and the ultimate triumph of justice over evil, even when that victory comes at an immeasurable personal cost. Strength like this deserves to be remembered. Subscribe to join us in telling the stories of families who would never stop fighting for justice.